Welcome to Clixed Off, brought to you by Lucky Dice Cafe out of Huntsville, Alabama. Check them out at LuckyDiceCafe.com. And now for your hosts, Daniel Powell, Jason Alvey, Alex Coons, and Tyler Speeds.
Hey everybody, welcome to Clixed Off today. This is your host Daniel Powell speaking. Just want to let everybody know that Clixed Off is brought to you by TrollandToad.com, the world's largest HeroClix retailer. Find HeroClix new and old on TrollandToad.com and use coupon code CLIXEDOFF for 5% off your HeroClix order. If you like what you're listening to today here on Clixed Off, check us out, patreon.com/ClixedOff. $1 and above gets entered into our monthly giveaways. $5 and above gets entered into our Discord server for HeroClix strategy and tactics discussion. So this is Daniel by myself today, but there's a few things I wanted to talk about as we go towards nationals, and we wrap up the first month of states going into the second month of states. There's a few things I wanted to talk about. I got my notes in front of me. So specifically, I want to cover today, I want to talk about maps. I want to talk about the matchup RNG today. And I've got a few questions. I asked our patrons in our Discord server some questions right before I recorded this, and want to kind of intersperse those in. So, and actually, it's JJ22 wanted to talk about maps. So the big thing I wanted to cover on maps, and a lot of this is hinging on WizKids right now as we go into Gen Con. And I know it's not just about US Nats, right? Canadian Nats is a couple of weeks after Gen Con. And I don't think they've announced Mexico Nationals yet. But I know Italian Nats is after Worlds. But the two biggest nationals, right, are before Worlds. I mean, that's the United States and Canada. Hopefully the UK has their Nats before Worlds too. They're probably the third biggest national tournament out there. But I want to talk about maps, and a lot of what this hinges on is WizKids updating the modern list to include the new rock maps. So if they do, I want to talk to you all about the state's winning map and Hell's Crossroads. Hell's Crossroads is available on Gamer Mats, and of course the new Rock State's prize map is winnable. I was trying to look and see. I was looking on HC Maps here to see if they had a picture of it yet. But the Hell's Crossroads and the new Rock prize map are nearly identical, with the Hell's Crossroads having less. There's no transitions in the middle of the crossroads area, but otherwise it's a completely symmetrical map. I don't have the Rock States prize one, so I said I was looking for the picture of it. But the thing to think about is these maps are completely symmetrical. If there's something different on the state's prize map, that'd be my mistake. But for the most part, they're completely symmetrical. So they're a really good map for you to choose to go second on, in that there's not much choice for your opponent. There's not an advantage for your opponent to gain by going to one side or the other. Compare that to, say, like construction site or one of the other 16 by 16 maps. I was going to look and see. I'm just doing a filter on HC maps by 16 by 16. You know, even like you take like the new Wakanda 16 by 16, it has a more defensible side with the throne room side of the map. You know, Avengers Tower, it's from Avengers 60th, has a little bit different elevated. It kind of looks like some different hindering for sure. I mean, it's pretty dang close. But there's some different hindering, it looks like, on that one. Ultron's Lair has the only hindering on the one side. And it also has that big mouth in the middle, right? It's even more oppressive of a map, one way or the other, because of the face being more pronounced in the smaller size. So, you know, going to these national tournaments, I want you to think about maps. I want y'all to be paying attention to the when the map list is updated. These maps can really make or break your gameplay. So I want y'all to think about, you know, how does your team work on these 16 by 16s, right? You know, you need some defense if you're put on a 16 by 16, obviously. But in general, right, the game's going to be a lot more engaging on a 16 by 16. Things are going to be happening quickly. They're going to be happening immediately. Now, what I want you to think about is reach on maps. 16 by 16s made for that engagement, right? But the 16 by 24s, a lot of teams don't necessarily have that reach on a 16 by 24. What I want you to be thinking about on your team builds, what's your defense? What's your protection? Namely, what's your barrier output? You know, there's things like Jubilee that still exist. That was on Jalen State's winning team. A lot of these things make a big difference. But keep in mind, what's your defense? What's your protection? What's your defense numbers? What's the amount of probs that you have? What's the chances of you getting hit versus not getting hit? Keep in mind, star exists. So that's a lot of what I wanted to talk about when it came to maps. The Rock Prize map for states, the Hell's Crossroads, if those get legal, those are my two favorite maps currently in Modern. You still get a lot of use out of like Negative Zone with its extended starting areas. That's a really important map in Modern still. So your staple maps don't necessarily change in Modern in the 16 by 24 level, but these 16 by 16 maps really can help you out or hinder you, just depending on your situation. But make sure with the maps that you have on your build sheet that you know how to use them, take advantage of every square. And then as we go to talk about RNG here, what maps do you have for what matchup RNG that you might run into? So map wise, I think that's a lot of what was on my mind. Acquiring these maps, right? We're about a month, a little less than a month out from US Nats at this point. Be acquiring these maps, right? Whether it's trading, borrowing, buying, right? Shipping still is pretty crazy, right? USPS can be slow. We all have experienced that in our Clix career, I think, for the most part. But be locating these maps that you need, whether it's the play-at-home kit, the mini game, stuff like that. This is now the time to be finalizing your purchases and your shipping when it comes to these maps. The same goes for your team too, but keep that in mind. So a little bit of thoughts conditioning wise, and this goes into Giordano's question that he has before I talk about RNG with teams. I wanted to talk a little bit about prepping yourself, and I usually cover this before each individual large tournament, whether it comes to Worlds or Gen Con or whatever, all the other countries' nationals. There's always the physical and mental prep for when it comes to these large tournaments, these multi-day, multi-hour tournaments. Let's talk about the mental side, right? Getting through a tournament, right? We play a game with dice. We play a game where you can make mistakes. But what I want you to focus on is, from your mental state and your mental capacity, do not let those rolls or let those mistakes ruin the rest of your day, ruin the rest of your game. Dice rolls are what they are, right? That's why I want you to think about when you're building your team, right? This is even before you step into the tournament. Building your team in such a way to mitigate dice rolls. High attack, the star, necro swords, outwits, battle fury from the emotional modifier, right? All of these different ways, positioning, right? Like if you're using Surfer's improved targeting, elevated, right? Are you taking advantage of that? Have you figured out what positions you can attack from on your maps to take advantage of that? If you're going in, like let's say Agatha Harkness, she ignores characters for targeting. Are you making your attacks? Have you keep in mind what is the state of their probs, their reroll pieces, their dice replacement pieces? How can you take advantage of the pieces of your team to position yourself in such a way to make those attacks to mitigate their positioning, right? So that's some of the mental prep that you're doing to keep yourself in check for the day of mental exhaustion that happens, right? Can you run your team on not autopilot, but are there things that you know you need to do that you don't forget to do in hour 7, 8, 9, 10 of a tournament? And don't be intimidated by your opponent, right? I mean, regardless of who your opponent is, they still need to be mentally prepped for the day. They still need to know how to pilot their team. HeroClix is not pay to win, right? A few episodes ago, I talked about we don't complain about the cost of teams anymore. We just don't. Now, if you're sitting across from a $2,000 team, don't be intimidated by that. No need. Can you pilot your team? Are you piloting your $300 team to the best of your abilities? They may not be able to pilot their $2,000 team to the best of their abilities, right? Or as good as they could. However you want to say that, right? Outgun them. Can you do that? Have you prepped for that? Have you practiced? And if you haven't practiced, have you at least thought about how your team plays, right? And a lot of this comes down to experience, right? We're coming into, 2023 was the seventh year I've been doing the podcast, and 9th year I've been playing the game. So a lot of things I can just do based on experience, right? But how do you, as the listener here, get to that next level, right? Repetition, experience, having the mental fortitude to continue forward in the face of adversity. You just got to be prepared to do that, especially in that 9th, 10th hour of a day. That third day of Gen Con, right? When you've been up playing games all night, you've been drinking, been having a little bit too much fun. Keep those things in mind, right? Have you prepped yourself prior to having all of that fun to make yourself successful for these things that we've invested our time and money into to travel to? So to answer your question, Giordano, the right amount of booze to have right before a state's event is probably 0. I don't know what grappa is. I wanted to Google it, but I assume it's some sort of wine. I'm going to Google it right now. Alcoholic beverage, a fragrant grape-based Pomont brandy of Italian origin that contains 35 to 60% alcohol. That's pretty strong. Never mind, it's a brandy, so that sounds pretty good. I'll have to try some of that at some point. So, I would say, there's a lot of folks, right, that are very braggart about their ability to drink right before an event and do well. That doesn't work out for everybody. Know yourself, know your limits. Be prepared with the amount of liquor that you can handle the night before the event. That segues into physical preparation for these events. So when it comes to the physicality of prepping for an event, what I want you to realize and think about is you're not going to be listening to your body like you would on a typical day. You're going to be playing, you're going to be talking to folks, playing clicks, open boosters, looking at stuff in the store, or if you're at Gen Con, you're going to be demoing other games, potentially, playing other games. You're going to be walking a lot. So 2 fronts I want you to think about when it comes to physical prep. First of all, walking, especially if you're going to Gen Con. You're going to be taking a lot of steps if you go to Gen Con. Everything is typically pretty far away from the venue floor or from the gaming area, right? So, it's 300 feet to the bathroom, right? The food and water is half a hall away, right? So that's half a hall away, a half of the hallway back. So, even to just support yourself on a day like that, right? You're going to have to either pack in a bunch of stuff to set up at your table, or you're going to need to be ready to walk 3, 4, 5 miles, maybe even more, if you walk the vendor hall. So in prep now, we're 3 weeks out from Gen Con. The best time to start is a year ago, but the next best time to start is now when it comes to that stuff. So start walking now. Make sure that if you're going to Gen Con, you've got good shoes. Get your new shoes if you need them. Start breaking them in now. Be prepared on the other front to think about when you play these long days of clicks, how your body reacts to things. How do you keep it nourished? What kind of things keeps your body nourished? What about your hydration levels? You're going to be talking a lot more. You're going to be moving more. Have a support system in place to hydrate yourself, to nourish yourself. If you're coming from out of town when it comes to Gen Con, right? Do you need to go to a grocery store ahead of time? Do you need to order in an Uber delivery to your Airbnb or to your hotel? These days become long. And I can't stress that enough. I know I've probably said that half a dozen times now. But when you want to reach the end game, the top cut, those final rounds of an event after 10 hours, if you're at like a states event, or if you're at Gen Con, right, it's going to be 3 days into Gen Con. You've got to know how your body works on cruise control and sit down and think about that. Okay, so as I go into my last segment here of thoughts, I want to have everybody check out the Auxxit HeroClix room, link to join in bio. I'd like to thank Auxxit for being a sponsor of the show, and check out their link to join in the bio. So last segment for today, and since I started recording this, there's been a couple more state events come in and complete. So the thing I want to talk about is matchup RNG and how things have arrived these days. So if you look at some of the states results that we're getting in, you're basically getting the RNG, right? You have, or the matrix, the triangle, right? Wherever you want to call it, right? Like what becomes what to face. So Ryan Stevenson won Arizona with the high defense Demon and Armor team. How does your team face with having its printed attack value against a 19, 20, 21, 22 defense? You know, the RNG in that matchup is, right, the Scarlet Witch helps. So, but that team with the high defense has a pretty dang good matchup versus like X-Men. X-Men can, by X-Men I mean the Sky Tyrant. I should rephrase that to be the Sky Tyrant Alpha. So, but this high defense team with Demon and Armor, you know, is an archetype that we've seen since Demon and Armor has come out, and works pretty dang well actually. But typically it kind of falls apart when somebody has really good dice rolls. The other part of that RNG is that team has some issues whenever the star comes up. So if the star comes up at the wrong time for that team, it can just be devastated, right, by folks, by those ones becoming sixes, right? So your 4 becomes a 9, your 5 becomes a 10 with the 2d6s, assuming one of those is a 1, or your critical miss is now a critical hit. So a lot of that is things I want y'all to think about when it comes to your matchup RNG. I'm going to go through a couple more of these teams here, but to round out the high defense team, I mean, that team has a ton of offense and is able to just run up and set in front of you. And additionally, Ryan was playing Wonder Woman, Death Metal Wonder Woman, along with the Prime Wonder Woman for the revive effect. He's playing Faust. Faust had Energy Shield on his team, so super duper high defense, super hard to KO. There was a Saturnine there, but keep in mind, Faust is a really good attacker. Demon and Armor is not bad. Wonder Woman's a super great attacker. She's like, what, 12-4, I think, 11-4, 12-4 on her top dial, and she can get the RCE from the Bat Belt, utility belt. So it's just a really strong team overall that can really do well against the Sky Tyrant Alpha, negating the RNG of the Star Tarot card, depending on when that pops up. So I noticed Ryan ran the Tower on his team, which is, I think, the all misses or critical misses card. So, you know, the Star and the Tower are battling each other there pretty closely on that team. But I love Ryan's team. Caleb Reddick has played a similar team in the past. He played Chip in there somewhere. Oh yeah, and Ryan was also playing Sakari and Iron Man. It's just crazy how many like 70 to 50 point 70 to 30 point characters you can fit on a team that are really great attackers. I mean, he's carrying up Saki, after he gets his objects, and Saki's sitting at a 21 base, without any of the potential ups and downs from the defend card that could come up. So if he comes up and he's a 22 with the defend card pops up, or the perplexes that are in play, and you're stuck at an 11, because keep in mind, Wonder Woman does have cosmic energy, so you're not outwitting her defend. So, not saying that any of these teams are unbeatable or they're the teams that you should go play. Point is, think about where your team matches up with the RNG of these other teams. Alright, so let's take a look at the next team. Alright, so next up I want to talk about Scarlet Witch. So, the big bad, right? Erases your powers. How do you counter her, right? So you want, we want to see, how does your team operate with no powers on it, right? So you want to rely on traits and abilities, team abilities, things that actually don't grant standard powers or special powers. So the counter to a switch, right, I think is most likely another switch. So, but the other thing I think is almost mandatory on nearly every team, and I'm seeing a whole lot of these in States results already, Necrosword. It has really shot up in value, or I guess playability, since the auto equips have come into play. Now, I mean, it was also a playable, whenever, there towards the end of Vulture when it first came out and stuff, but there were just too many ways to destroy it and get around it and that sort of thing prior to that, and it just really wasn't that played. But now that you can just rock and roll on your Sky Tyrant, your World's Finest, it's just a really great piece to use. And the other thing when you've got your, you're talking about going against Switch, is how does your team work stat-wise with no perplexes and that sort of thing available to it. So really, I mean, that's really not too much of a consideration. A lot of teams just have generally good stats to begin with. So just keep that in mind, right? Are you starting out with a 10 attack or an 11 attack or a 12 attack? Are you relying on close combat or ranged combat expert to make things work? All right, so briefly, just want to cover the other big bad, one of the other big bads, the Scarab. And, where does Scarab end up, right? How do you get rid of Scarab? A lot of Scarab is being able to just alpha him, right? So utilizing things like Sky Tyrant's Quake to get through barrier, and then the multiple attacks through the MOE chases, or through Dark Phoenix's moves. You just got to get Scarab off the map immediately. Think about being able to go first so that you don't get force blasted. If it's theme and you go second, right, because they want to go first, make sure that you have an anti-Scarab map on your list. Again, I talked about this earlier in this episode, I don't know, about 15 minutes ago, is know your maps, study your maps, have a plan for if you get to use maps, and just be ready to go. So, I mean, Scarab is what it is. I mean, Scarab is probably the most oppressive piece in Modern that is available. And if you're not ready for it, a Scarab can just force blast, outwit, radioactive clay your day until you're done. And there's just nothing you're going to be able to do about it. So you just have to be ready for that sort of thing. Alpha the shit out of Scarab. That's the plan. I want to talk about MOE chases. So MOE chases, Mephisto, you know, is there a lot you can do to counter them? Somewhat. The Iron Inquisitor's Mastermind, having multiple bolts, that helps. Quaking, all of the general things to use to get around Mastermind. King Killmonger. I think this is why I really like Mad Jim Jaspers. You know, the ability to equip something to a figure in case you run into an MOE chase. That's super huge. That's why I run Mad Jim Jaspers, right? I mean, just being able to power action equip something, right? You're talking about taking Mad Jim Jaspers from 35 points to, say, 15 or 20 points or 25 points, you know, depending on what level of object you're equipping. Really super big piece, or super valuable piece. Now the other big prime in the room is Hulk. How do you handle Hulk? Well, you probably just try to ignore Hulk. I think is my opinion on the matter. Just try to ignore him. Putting one outwit onto his charge is typically a big deal. Typically enough to keep him at bay. You're probably just trying to avoid Hulk unless he gets a really low heal to start out with, or they don't heal, or you take them, you know, they can't do what they want to do, right, because of what you've done. And there's not much you can do. You can play some of your objects weird. You can offensive rune him, but he's 10 points. Make sure your build has outwit. Just outwit his charge. That helps out a lot. Now, if they have the Dark Phoenixes, he's going to start attacking you. But do they have a Sky Tyrant? They're probably using the moves on the Sky Tyrant. And I think this brings me around to my whole other point on the MOE chases. While they do have some offense available to them, they're not the hyper attackers of Saki, Surfer, Tyrant, Hulk, blah, 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 right? Scarab. They are tech pieces, in my opinion. So they are adding little spice to the team here and there. And I think the big thing that you get from the MOE chases and facing them is take out the Tyrant, take out the Scarab, take out the Hulk, take out whatever else they're using, the Surfers, and then handle the MOE chases at the end. And theoretically, they're pretty easy to take care of with some penetrating damage and that sort of thing. You know, not a huge deal to take them out. But if they have a cannon that they're firing at you, they're going to fire that cannon at you really hard. I mean, we still see a lot of the same things that you see. Surfer. All right, everybody's going to want to know, how do you get rid of Surfer? How do you get rid of Surfer? How do you take care of Surfer? Well, the easiest thing on Surfer, I think, for the most part, is just attack him, right? You know, you want access to the emotional modifier or the Necro Sword. He is just a super hyper efficient attacker. As you know, pretty easy to state that there and say that. But at the end of the day, you know, you can just attack him and he falls down pretty quick. Now, he could heal back up, but stealth, relatively higher defense, rollouts, unless they're playing a specific like Mad Jim Necro Sword version of the build, he's not too bad to take out. Going down my list here of folks that I wanted to talk about, and keep in mind, right, as you're listening through this, it's RNG, right? What matchup RNG do you have? What team are you playing, and how does it go into the RNG versus these pieces? So let's talk about Prime Spider-Man, a surprising piece at a lot of times at a 80 to 95, I don't know, 80 point investment at the base with a 95 point with a Necro Sword, right? He's Charge Flurry. He can get across the whole map on the big maps with a couple of TKs, like a Venomags TK and then Wall Crawler, and then a Charge Flurry with a Giant Reach typically helps him out a lot. But the big thing for him, he does have the Super Senses Impervious and Protected Outwit on that power, so he's got a 50-50 rollout and reduces penetrating damage. And you can't really ignore this guy. Obviously, you know, tools in the toolkit, Necro Swords, Scarlet Witches, Scarab, right? If this Spider-Man is able to go off, and the outwit is on his movement power, right, that severely hampers him. So that's why I said Scarab. But, I mean, another super duper efficient attacker here. That's one of the cannons, right? I'm looking, he's played with Venom Magneto, and Spider-Man goes out and starts eating stuff. I mean, that's just how it looks. I mean, you've got to be able to get through this guy in a way that makes sense. So, is there probably another dozen figures to talk about? Probably. But let's see, I've covered the Switch, the Defend Bubble, the Scarab, the MOE Chases, the Hulk, the Prime Spider-Man. I think a lot of those things are what's new as we go into Nats and Worlds here, and finishing out States, Nats, Worlds. And I've recorded this over several sessions. I've had an extremely busy week, and the guys haven't been able to get together either. So we've been rocking and rolling here, getting stuff ready to be at Gen Con and whatnot. So if I forgot what I've talked about, so what's been like 35 minutes for y'all has actually been like 5 days for me. But every time I've had a moment to record something, I've been doing that. So I want to look at just a couple more of the other results. And I had my list here of things to talk about. I had a few other questions to answer, so let me get those pulled up, please. So they would be further back in here. So, sorry. So it's JJ. We talked about the maps, Jackson underused or underplayed things that are good right now. I think all the things that have been winning Jackson are the stuff that's really good. Peter, your question's kind of the same way. Top 5 figures you thought should be making on the builds, and you know, and I think what I wanted to say here is, you know, folks that want to go to nationals, want to go to worlds, when I'm building for these things, when we talk about how oppressive Scarab is, these folks are going to be at nationals. They're not at these local states where Scarab's not winning. So like props to Scott for, you know, winning with Scarab, right? Like if you want to go to a national tournament, now keep in mind, I know Scott's not actually attending Gen Con this year other than Sunday. He's got wrestling tickets, as he's talked about on his podcast. But, you know, you have those other folks that are very likely to play Scarab and ready to rock and roll. So what I would say in general to that question, Jackson, is I'm not seeing as much Scarab as I thought I would be. So, Justin, thoughts on new terrain in the meta? Lava pits, really good. Seeing that used to seeing that been used to activate figures like Cosmo to get him onto a special outwit. Top 5, top 4 favorite builds, Miles. I mean, I don't know, favorite. That's such a weird thing, right? Like, I really do like the MOE chases. I do like all the characters, or the amalgamation of characters, or the Mephisto morphed characters, whatever that term is. So MOE's, really been a really great set of characters to see winning. And then, I guess a year later, right, like, should have been playing Scarlet Witch a long time, but Thanos. So, my other favorite build has just been things where you see Scarlet Witch, and then just the power of that. Now, I'll add a little bonus segment here at the end. My thoughts on retirement. I just don't know. I get asked that question quite a bit in DM and whatnot. Like, have you heard anything on retirement? I haven't. What's my speculation on retirement? I think I have two speculations. And I'll share those real quick. Let me pull up the set list here. I think there's two things that I have as speculation. X of Swords is the oldest set in Modern. So Disney Plus and older gets retired. The other one of that is Empire is the oldest set in Modern. So I think Empire to Disney Plus, so that's Empire, Avengers Forever. No, hold on. That's not right. Not Avengers Forever. Sorry. Eternals movie would be the oldest set in Modern. And then Empire, Fantastic Four, 2021 storyline set would retire. War of the Realms, and Disney Plus. So those are the 5-ish sets that I think are on the bubble. Do they get rid of those 5? Do they not? Do they stick Disney Plus around? Do they cut it off at, say, War of the Realms? Do we get rid of Fantastic Four Empire? I don't know. But I would expect X-Men Rise and Fall to certainly retire. And then I think it could go all the way up to where X of Swords is the oldest set in Modern. Now, oh gosh, absolutely no, sorry headphone users, absolutely no opinion, or absolutely no fact or rumor or anything along those lines that I've heard to back up or substantiate said rumors. So just keep that all with a grain of salt. Make your own decisions of what's going to be retired. Personally, we're seeing, we just saw Scott Porter's legacy cards for Notorious today, and there's fairly recent stuff in there. Well, I take that back, I guess. Brimstone seems like he was only out just the other day. But that was actually what, like 7 years ago. So I'm looking at the set of those figures. Was there anything recent in that one? I guess, you know what? I guess Joker's Wild was the recent one. So you've got figures from Silver Age coming in back into Modern. So I'd say don't be getting rid of your figures so quickly these days, folks. But Notorious won't be legal for Worlds at this point. September 20th is the release date. So hopefully we get to play with Notorious at Worlds. But I would say, as we round out the road to Nats and finish out the road to Worlds, We'll probably pick up our Notorious coverage closer to after Worlds. We'll probably talk about it here and there, but keep in mind, we want to highlight some of the new figures and the cool stuff that's coming out. And if we get an unboxing from WizKids, we'll certainly cover Notorious. But from a competitive standpoint, I want y'all to keep your mind on what's coming, what's legal for Worlds and Nats. Keep your mind focused there. And hey, if this episode seems a little disjointed, it's because I recorded it disjointed. But I had some thoughts. I wanted to get those out to y'all. Thanks everybody for listening to Clixed Off today. We'll talk to y'all next time.